Hello and welcome to Founded, an airwave media podcast, where we find the stories you missed in history class, because the tea was hot before they dumped it into the harbor. I'm Tori Phantom, and joining me today is someone who will deny being present at the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, Gwenna Lathland.
I for sure was not there, seeing as I was born in 1984. That's my alibi.
What did I say? What did I say?
Called it. Nailed it. Got me.
Okay, so before we get to our pop quiz today, it is time for Founded Find Out.
Hey.
New segments. So on Founded Find Out, we will find out together the things we didn't have the answers to on a previous episode. So we recently talked about Thomas Hutchinson's wife and daughter that were named Margaret but went by the nickname Peggy. We asked where the nickname came from, and now we have an answer. So a big thank you to everyone who had the answer, including but not limited to Alexis, Sammy, and Lisa. And the simple answer is that humans are silly and love rhymes. But Celia, who has a doctorate in linguistics from Georgetown, gave us the long answer, and I find it really interesting. So here's what she said. Back in the Middle Ages, people shortened Margaret to Meg. Totally reasonable so far. Then, because medieval folks apparently got bored and started rhyming things for fun, Meg got turned into Peg. No real logic, just vibes. Although I could go even more linguistic nerd and tell you that M is a voiced bilabial nasal sound and P is a voiceless bilabial sound, both easy to produce and tend to be the first sounds that babies make, see mama and papa. And since everything got a cute Y added to it, Peg became Peggy. So the journey goes Margaret to Meg to Peg to Peggy. Essentially, your name went backpacking through Europe and came home with a new personality. This same rhyming chaos is why Mary turned to Molly turned to Polly, Richard turned to Rick turned to Dick, and Robert turned to Rob turned to Bob. Basically, medieval people were just out there remixing names like they were running the first TikTok sound studio. Hope this brings clarity or at least mutual confusion.
That's amazing.
Right? Like, thank you so much for this explanation, Celia. It does bring some clarity and mutual confusion, but I guess now when we're confused about names, we could just see if it almost rhymes.
But it makes perfect sense to me. I am 0% confused.
No,
I got it. I'm there. My name is Ben now because Gwenna to Gwen to Ben. Obvi.
Yeah.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, Ben and Gwen aren't glottal, but whatever.
Because my kids, their nicknames, through this same process, I ended up nicknaming my own children. So I'm like, wait, okay, nope, humans are just silly.
No,
We're silly little guys. Yep.
It makes sense. Well, and I'm even thinking about how I spell the nicknames of my children, like how I spell their real names and how I spell their nicknames. And I've added letters that aren't even in the original name.
Right?
In both of the children that have like formal, I will sometimes write it down nickname. Not just like a pet name we call them in the house, but like their actual short form name. Only 2 of the 3 have one. And both of them have letters that don't actually appear in their name. Oh, yeah. I Peggy'd my children.
All right. So we're all out here peggying. But are you ready for your pop quiz?
Yes.
All right. This is going to be an easy one. So
probably not.
Yeah. No, it is. It is. I promise. I stumped you last week. So who were the governor and lieutenant governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony?
Francis Bernard and Thomas Hutchinson.
Yes.
Respectively.
And what happened to Thomas Hutchinson?
Many things. They gutted his house, basically.
They did.
For being Thomas Hutchinson.
Basically. And who were some prominent figures in the Whig Party in Boston at this time? Now, the Whigs are kind of like the radicals.
Yeah, so that would be Sam Adams, Lightning Boy.
Yeah, James Addis Jr.
The Angry Scotsman. He was kind of a problem.
Yeah, he was kind of a problem too, yeah.
John Hancock.
John Hancock? Not yet.
Not yet.
But we will be talking.
He's super waffly, though.
Yeah.
Is this the part where we start to dislike John Hancock a little bit?
I think this is the part we start to like him.
Oh.
It gets complicated. We're going to pancake our opinion of John Hancock throughout our tales of revolution. And speaking of Hancock, who was one of the richest colonists?
Oh, yeah, it was
It
Hancock.
was John Hancock, yeah.
Yeah.
I just gave you the answer. And last question, what was everyone so mad about?
Oh, stamps.
Stamps.
They didn't want to pay for the paper.
They hated
The stamps. That made the paper. George Grenville likes stamps.
Yes, he really enjoyed them.
Goosey goosey boy.
But before we get into what happened after all the rioting, I need to remind you that just a few months before all that chaos ensued, Governor Bernard shut the House of Representatives down when they proposed a Continental Congress to address that stamp situation.
Yeah.
And we know that that shutdown didn't change the public opinion or anything else. No. Even the people who you'd think would be in the government's pocket to continue lining their own pockets, the merchants, they were stressed about the stamps. And our favorite political pancake, John Hancock, sent off several mildly worded letters to his pals in London, demanding that the merchants there stand up and speak out for the colonists, and telling them that they won't be able to pay their debts, so say goodbye to any payments. So while not quite as extreme as mob action and rioting, Hancock's social status meant that his words did hold weight with the English merchants that had pull in Parliament.
I mean, he wasn't wrong, and honestly, it wasn't even like a lying sort of like tactic. Like, do you hold a debt of mine? In order to pay that debt, I have to have money to give you. But if I have to pay for the stamps, you know what I will not have? Money to give you.
Yeah. He was telling them, you need to speak up for us because they won't listen to us. And even Thomas Hutchinson shot off a letter to his pals in England saying if they actually started stamping stuff, the courts would fall and all authority would end. But he did so in the Hutchinson way because after he said the more extreme part there, he assured them that Parliament should not worry about losing authority by backtracking into repealing the act, because if they force compliance, which at this point only thought to be possible with military force, that they would have a, quote, total lasting alienation of affection from the colonies. And he asked, isn't there any other alternative? Because
literally anything else but the stamps. And I keep going back to this because I spend way more time thinking about this than I appreciate. Thank you. I keep going
You're
back.
Welcome.
The taxing the money thing was such a good idea.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben Franklin.
The taxing the paper currency was such a friggin' good idea because the people with the most paper currency would pay the most taxes.
It does make most sense because the people without money have less money to give, which means they can't afford things like feeding their families if they are taxed to all extremes. But you might.
But stamps.
Yeah.
But
stamps.
the stamps. Okay,
the
go
stamps.
ahead. Strong, mildly worded letters of wishy-washy pancakes didn't seem to be super effective because we have a spoiler for this one. Go ahead.
Now, you might also remember that the man appointed to the stampman position in Massachusetts Bay, Andrew Oliver, had resigned totally of his free will. He just wasn't into the position.
Him and all of the other potential stamp agents and a couple guys who 100% weren't stamp agents and were never going to be stamp agents are definitely not going to be stamp agents now.
Yeah. And, but what this meant was that one royal governor, Francis Bernard, landed the role by default. He had to take charge of those stamps and he wanted nothing to do with it, especially knowing that those stamps were expected to arrive any day. Pretty sticky position to be in, what with all the mobs and effigies and all. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he had a choice to make. And Bernard, he decided that he'll have the stamps delivered to Castle William, which was a military fort, so he could keep an eye on them. And then he ordered more enlistments in the militia just to strengthen the garrison. But to calm the murmuring masses, he declared to the council that he, quote, had no warrant whatsoever to unpack a bale of them or to order anyone else to do so. And he continued saying it's inconceivable to believe that he'd ever be so careless to get involved. He just
Listen,
figured
we have to take them. The boat's going to show up. We can't send the boat back with them, so we're going to take them off the boat. We're going to put them in the old dusty basement of this here fort, and we're going to forget about them because I'm not dumb enough to touch them. Nobody wants them, and I'm not going to be the one handing them out.
And he wasn't dumb enough to touch them for multi ways, right? Because on one hand, he did not want an effigy made of him. Right. And on the other hand, he figured that if he stored the stamps and then strengthened the castle perimeter, right, that he could keep mobs from destroying the stamps, which would not only insult the king, but also, if those stamps were destroyed, the colony would be responsible for paying for the destruction. Like the destruction of property would be held accountable, which is subtle foreshadowing for some tea in a few years. But upon the council's urging, he published this declaration he made at the council in the newspapers. Didn't matter. He had to stop the enlistments and also discharge the men that had enlisted. But he was allowed to store the stamps.
So he's got a castle basement full of stamps, literal actual stamps.
Yeah.
Wait, no. Just go ahead and drop a spoiler before we get there. Do the stamps make it?
They do. That's what happens next. In early September, a ship arrived in Boston. What was on the boat? Stamps with the stamp paper. It wasn't like postal stamps. It was it was like a embossment and it's like an insignia, the royal thing. But along with the stamps, some really big news arrived. You're not ready for this.
I'm sure I am.
George the Goose Grenville was no longer in power. Turns out he was canned all the way back in July, before the riots.
Oh my God. So Stamp Boy, who is basically single-handedly fueling what becomes an entire revolution. Yes, it was a very complicated thing. There were many, many, many things that led up to. But the catalyst to them losing their minds and rebelling were the stamps. And this man didn't even keep his dang job long enough to see them go into effect.
Yeah. And he didn't lose his job over his bad ideas or poor execution of them or the commitment to the stamps,
did,
by the way.
But no, that's not where they wrote it down.
No, he had a personal disagreement with the king. So he got canned. But on your note of the whole it was his fault, literally, side quest here, there were British officials who blamed Grenville for the problems with the colonies. Because you see, Grenville's predecessor left the colonies to themselves during times of peace because colonial affairs didn't affect parliament politics.
Right.
The colonies were so ignored that letters going to the colonies would sometimes be addressed to, quote, the governor of the island of New England. They had no idea anything about the colonies, like nothing, right? So,
the island of New England. Just one of you guys over there, dude, you need this. The island. Yeah.
And so after Grenville got goosed, a Treasury official who'd been aware of colonial communications said that Grenville lost America because he actually read American dispatches, which none of his predecessors had done.
He knew way too much for his own good. He remembered it existed, and he made that everyone's problem, including his own.
Yeah, like literally, like, why did you open the letters? Why didn't you just continue ignoring them like we did and then benefit from the trade? Sure, we weren't getting any customs duties, and it was costing us money to try to collect them, but...
Also, can we discuss how petty King G3 is? Because, well, and George the Goose is also pretty petty because he had to beg King G3, hey, would you stop going to the old guy? It's my job. And then a year later... he gets canned.
His administration only lasted like 2 years. Yeah.
Georgie.
This news changed everything because that goose was replaced by an administration that sympathized with the colonies. And suddenly, repeal of the Stamp Act seemed possible as soon as the next session of Parliament, because no one loved stamps like Grenville. And that simple bit of news brought more peace to the colonies than anything the governments could have done. And now that the door suddenly seemed open again for legal forms of redress, repeal of the Stamp Act didn't just seem possible, but likely.
Yeah.
Oh, but also on the boat was the stamp man for New Hampshire who did resign before he even stepped foot on land. So it didn't matter.
I'm not getting off the boat as a stamp man. Did he
Nope.
get off the boat, or did he just stay on the boat and wait for it to turn around and go back?
He did get off the boat. He just made sure everyone knew that he was not going to do the stamp thing before he stepped foot in Boston. Like, he already heard the news. He's like, I'm good, man. I'm good.
you know, he was on the UK side going, do we port is Boston? Could we like port anywhere else? There's lots of ports up and down that coast, right? Do we have to make port? Yeah. Boston? Boston's where you're going to drop me off. Boston's not the closest thing to New Hampshire. We can go to like Rhode Island. No, probably not better.
Did you see what they did to Hutchinson's house? They could do that to a boat. I feel like they could do that to a boat.
They could do it to a boat.
Yeah, don't.
I mean, a bunch of them can't swim, but enough of them got to be able to do that, right? They live on a port. They can swim, probably.
Maybe. Perhaps.
Sidebar, side quest. The number of people in the Navy at pretty much every point in history that cannot swim. Fascinating to me. Always a fascinating stat. The number of people, especially in historical, it's not quite such a thing in modern times, but in historical, the people in the Royal Navy who could not swim. You live on a boat, pumpkin.
I will be falling down that rabbit hole later. Yeah.
A lot of naval officers could not swim.
Most of the people who crossed the Delaware with Washington also couldn't swim.
Yeah. And you got on a boat? Like, that self-preservation is not there. Okay, go.
But even though the goose being gone was good news, and the people were now hopeful, they were still in a pickle. Because what do they do in the meantime? The Stamp Act is set to go into effect before the next session of Parliament where it could be repealed. And Bernard was so concerned with the current state of things during these unprecedented times that he reconvened the House earlier than he had intended. And Bernard opened the session with an address where he talked about the recent mob violence in town and how concerned he was with the townspeople openly declaring that the Stamp Act should never be executed. So he asked both the Council and the House of Representatives to join him in strengthening the executive authority to assist in getting people to change their minds. He said that the Stamp Act might not be practical, but Parliament still had the authority to pass it. And he cautioned the House and the Council about denying Parliament's right because doing so could stand in the way of repeal, because Parliament would probably require submission to the Act as a preliminary measure to repeal it. And then he threw in the idea that they should compensate the people who suffered at the hands of the rioters, Tommy Boy and Andy, as an act of justice, but that it was ultimately up to the Assembly.
See, we were doing so good right up into that last bit, buddy. Right. Yeah. We were following right up into that last bit, and I sense that's the bit that made everybody else mad too.
Yeah.
Because like everything else does make sense. Basically, they're going to repeal the Stamp Act. We can say that with a good bit of confidence. But if we openly rebel against this thing, if news gets back that we're still rioting about it, that we destroyed the stamps, and that we have no intention of abiding by their laws, well, now they're going to get petty. And they're going to send people over here to make sure we use their rules. So we'll do what we need to for just a sec. And then they'll see that we're still team players and they'll take it away.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like, we're going to end up in a power struggle and there's no way this ends well.
Right. But so we'll pretend to do the stamps for a hot second, chill, and also maybe pay Tommy and Andy back for their stuff.
But quick sidebar about the Hutchinson house hullabaloo and that part of his address. Hutchinson had been told that the government would compensate him for his and his family's losses, which was nearly $1 million in today's money of damages. And in a letter he wrote about it, he said he wasn't sure if they actually would, but he'd be applying to the king for help, quote, in whose service I am a sufferer, if they didn't compensate him. And he went on to say that the estimates didn't come close to the compensation he's owed for the constant stress and anxiety he and his family were under, which might sound extreme. But also, right after they tore his house down, he tried to get out of town with his kids, and multiple different groups tried to swarm his coach and, well, get him. And he had eventually hired folks to fix his home, but he never could feel safe in it again, and he moved. And also, like, let's remember, no one would arrest any of the rioters.
Yeah.
So there was really no form of justice or redress
and it was
here.
Again, it was so scary. His daughter ran back into the house and begged him, Daddy, you can't stay. They'll kill you. They'll actually kill you. You have to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And like, this wasn't a 5-year-old. This was a near grown daughter running in. Like, the mob is going to kill you if you don't run.
Yeah.
That's how bad it was. This is not melodramatics. I mean, it feels melodramatic from our position. What do you mean the mob's going to...
Yeah.
Threatening huzzahs!
So many threatening huzzahs.
But like, that's how bad it was. Like, a lot of times, anytime mental distress gets added to something, people are like, you're just money grabbing.
No.
I imagine it's a little stressful.
Yeah. And
just
how
to
does that affect
constantly
your
be
ability
aware
to work?
Because of who I am, because of the job that I have, and because of some of the choices that I have made. You guys think you can, like, kill me? I don't want to do that. I don't want to die.
Right. Exactly. Like, it's a complicated thing to consider. It's kind of a fun thought experiment. But back to Bernard's address, which he wrapped up by acknowledging the difficult part that these officials had to play, and that he knew that they might not be convinced of how necessary it was to submit to the stamps, but he warned that things would in fact get worse if they didn't submit. So he asked the assembly to just think about it and consider if disobeying the act would produce more evil than submitting to it. And if they came to the same conclusion that he did, that disobeying it would be worse, then it would be cool if they tried to persuade their constituents to submit to it as well. And he even offered to put the House back into a recess to give them time to think before they responded. But pretty quickly, the House realized that they couldn't quite convince themselves of the stamp necessity. Very shortly after, boy, was Royal Governor Francis Bernard surprised when the House showed up with a bill to keep everything going business as usual without stamps when November 1st rolled around.
Yeah. I mean, again, I see the logic of both, but his point did make sense, but also still feels a little bit like bending the knee. But also... yeah, but obedience is kind of what we agreed to do. It's sort of the only thing that we actually have to do over here is obey when they tell us to do stuff. Because honestly, up until this point, they didn't spend a whole lot of time telling us to do stuff.
But that's why everyone was so mad, right? And I think
correct.
Like, the act of writing this bill really kind of cemented their argument that they do have a right to self-govern. They always have. So yes, Parliament passed this Stamp Act, and now we are proposing this bill to just not use them.
To not do that.
Right.
Which is, in fact, a little borderline-y, some gray area, just a little hair's breadth into treason.
Yeah. So how do you think Bernard responded?
Screaming into the midnight, because that's treason. And treason for colonists, it's treason. They're a treasonist. Oh no, for a governor, that's a guillotine. That's what that looks like.
Yeah, well, what Bernard decided to do, because it was kind of tricky to tell people they were doing something wrong at this time if you had all the power. He decided that they actually did need more time to think about it, and he shut the House back down.
He recessed.
Yeah, he just put them back in a recess.
You didn't. That's not what you meant. You're just gonna. You want to think about that some more. That's what you said, right? You didn't just like write down a whole act of treason.
No, I think you need some more time to think. And he shut the House down before they could give their official response to his initial address. But the House did appoint a committee to draft a long response to Bernard's address with the intent of proving that obedience wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
But there's a sidebar here with Bernard's intentions, because he had other reasons for trying to push people into submission. And it wasn't just the treason thing. He was actually afraid of the consequences, because no ships would be cleared through the port until the Stamp Act was accepted. And Boston heavily relied on trade. So he worried that the people wouldn't have everything they need to get them through the winter. They were already struggling because they didn't have any money. So pay the tax so that you can not afford the goods that will be imported. Like, that's kind of, there's no easy answer.
Right. But again, if they don't pay the tax with the money they don't have, they won't even have the goods, because the British captains will not undock, or like they won't make port and actually let the stuff off their boat. Unless they're for sure they're going to bring all the paperwork back, because they are the ones that have to go back to England and go, I don't have any stamps or money that for the stuff that I took over. They won't do it.
And all because
they'll just
of that
turn their boat back around and go back across with the stuff still on it.
Yeah, all because of that goose. He didn't even have that job anymore.
Didn't even.
I know. But when the House reconvened in October, they presented their response, which basically said, I'm paraphrasing like a little here, okay? It basically said, Bernard, buddy, we had no concern about a lack of authority and couldn't have even thought there was weakness in executive power until you declared it in your little address. If people are unwilling to pay for stamps and would rather just not do business than do business with stamps, well, we're not responsible for that. Also, we don't think it's a crime. And that Stamp Act you keep going on about, it doesn't require them to use the stamp paper. It just details how much the stamps cost if they want to use them. And you might say that Parliament's right to tax Americans is undisputed over in England, but respectfully, we're not trying to argue here. We're going to hold your hand while we say this. We're going to hold your hand while we point you in the direction of our colony charter. Have you read it? Cool document. Yeah, it states pretty plain and clear that the General Assembly has the power to make laws and tax these people. And we don't remember our charter being forfeited, do you? I mean, not only do we not remember it ever being brought into question, but actually our charter has always been recognized by the King and Parliament. And honestly, the fact that Parliament, even though the supreme power over all British subjects, is even considering this kind of overreach, well, it's disrespectful. All that to say, Parliament does not and could not ever represent the colonies. Quote, indeed, we think it quite impracticable. But also, about those riot victims, how can you condemn all of Boston for the choices of a few bad actors? We can't use tax money on such things. Our hands are tied. And in conclusion, quote, we deeply regret that Parliament has seen fit to pass such an act as the Stamp Act, and we must beg your excellency to excuse us from doing anything to assist in the execution of it.
Oh, I love 18th century puns. I love 18th century puns because they use the word execution on purpose, because it means both kill the act and abide by the act, depending on how you choose to listen to it. I love 18th century puns. Yeah.
Now, I got a question for you. Who do you think wrote that response? It's gotta be
is it somebody that I know, or is this a trick question that there's no possible way I've known this because you've never said this man's name?
Okay, so it is someone you know, but it is also a trick question because I did leave part of the story out here. Okay?
Okay.
Because, like, I just forgot to mention that something had changed in the House of Representatives right before the shutdown. You see, during the summer shutdown, one of the Boston representatives passed away, which meant there needed to be a special election to fill his seat. Who was running for the election? Also, I do use running lightly because there wasn't campaigning at the time. Seeming disinterested was like the most important part of public service because private interest was bad for the public good. Public service should be a personal burden for the greater good. Like, that's how
basically, if you looked too excited, they thought you were just itching to stick your hand in the government purse and grab a couple of those coins for yourself, that you were in it for the corruption, you were in it for the power, and in such a religiously important society where they valued their religion and their faith so highly, that would be greedy and egotistical and not godlike.
And a lot of the government positions at the time were unpaid. And that's why a lot of them held multiple titles. Like Thomas Hutchinson was not paid to be the lieutenant governor. He was paid to be the chief justice. It depended on the position, but many of the public service positions were volunteer positions. And it came up a lot where people didn't even want that position, but the public knew that they would fill it well. And so they would begrudgingly accept these positions because it was for the greater good, and they thought that would limit the corruption. Fun fact about how that worked. But back to who was, quote unquote, running for election. We're just going to focus on two candidates, okay? The first being John Hancock, who hadn't been interested in politics despite being a selectman until the Stamp Act. And then suddenly, there were all these riots, and now rich people with power were at risk of being ransacked. And they were also at risk of going broke because of the taxes. So he found a new passion for politics and was obviously disinterested. Yeah, he was more disinterested than he had been, though, because it was around this time that his concern shifted from just his personal wealth and prosperity to colonial rights. His mind started to change when he started to listen to the people around him, even saying in another mildly worded letter about the Stamp Act, quote, "We look upon it as unconstitutional." However, people didn't like a fence sitter. And at this point, Hancock was giving Aaron Burr, sir. He was talking less, smiling more. He didn't let anyone know what he was against or what he was for, you know? It's just...
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thanks, Lynn. But obviously that landed Hancock in last place. He only got like 40 votes. So who did he lose to in this election?
I am, just because of how the show is run, it is either Lightning Boy or Sam.
Well, Lightning Boy James Otis Jr. was already in the House of Representatives, so you are
true.
correct. Samuel Adams joined his pal in the House. And I'm
sure Bernard was like, whoa.
Yeah, no, the Tories weren't happy about it, especially after seeing how quickly Otis and Adams took over nearly every important committee, with Bernard eventually saying that those who were now controlling everything were the, quote, faction in perpetual opposition to the government, adding, quote, "What with inflammatory speeches within doors and the parades of the mob without." He said that they'd taken over the little remains of government. But Bernard had not said these things yet because Samuel had only just been sworn into the House moments before the shutdown.
Listen, I know what Francis Bernard looks like, and he's a piggy little man. But I just imagine him taking his fat wigged forehead and just ramming it into a wall, because there's no possible way he did not know how big a problem this was going to be for him. There's no possible way he thought that Sam Adams joining this was going to be good for him or Tommy.
Right. Because that's exactly it, right? Because the House shutdown did not slow Samuel Adams down at all. He didn't need to gain his footing in House politics because Samuel Adams was politics. He was routinely selected at the town meetings to write the instructions for the Boston representatives to bring to the assembly. And so Samuel got to work during the brief recess of 3 to 4 weeks. And
a recess is just more time to sit and write, pumpkin.
Right. And Samuel was always working behind the scenes anyway, so he just kept it up, which is how, despite not being appointed to the committee in charge of writing the response, he couldn't have been. He was only there for 5 minutes. He was suddenly the chairman of the committee appointed to present the House's response to Bernard when the House reconvened in October. Chairman.
Hey, new kid, you're going to be in charge. Ready, set, go.
Yep.
But here's the thing is, and I don't want the rest of the committee members to look back. They already knew it was happening. Again, as a reminder, they already knew that Samuel Adams definitely hadn't, he definitely didn't hang that effigy or the boot. That wasn't Sam Adams. No.
Well, To be fair.
I mean, never mind that the tree was right next to his property.
He
No.
probably didn't hang it. He probably coordinated it.
Right.
But that's
I mean,
the
he
thing
wouldn't
with
hang it.
Samuel.
He would have hired
Yeah.
somebody to hang it.
He was
But-
always doing too much, okay? Because he didn't just write the response to Bernard's address, okay? He also wrote some resolves, just 15 of them.
We love resolves. Do they stay at 15 or do they grow?
These ones didn't grow, and I am not going to read them all. You can find them. You can find links to where I find all my information in the source link in the episode description. But I'm gonna give you like a little overview here, okay? Because Samuel's resolves start off by saying that their rights are being called into question, and he is answering that call. And within these 15 resolves, he says that there are essential inalienable rights that Englishmen are entitled to under the Constitution, and that the colonists are entitled to the same liberties and privileges of those in the motherland, and that the recent acts of Parliament are infringing upon those rights. He talks about their rights to representation and points out how Americans have never been represented in the way that Englishmen across the ocean are, and that they never could be, all while denouncing the taking of property without consent and their right to trial by jury being violated, which was a part of the British Constitution. And he wraps up his resolves by saying that they love and have the utmost loyalty to the king and his authority, and that they have great veneration for the Parliament. Just a little word change there. A little word change. The veneration. And you know who noticed that little bit of a word change?
Angelica?
Thomas Hutchinson, who pointed out in his history book that the resolves didn't acknowledge the authority of Parliament at all. Authority to the king, but veneration to the Parliament, saying, quote, Parliament's authority is denied for want of representation, upon the same reasons all acts whatever might have been denied, but the resolves were passed. Hutchinson said that there were inconsistencies, though, because after passing those resolves, the House said it was their duty to obey acts of Parliament until repeal. But then he said it wasn't uncommon because the body is governed by just a few of its members, but sometimes just a single member. And for the last few years, James Otis Jr. had been the top dog in the House, but he wasn't there at the time, having left to go to the Stamp Act Congress. Hutchinson noted that the response to the governor and the resolves carried the marks of Samuel Adams' compositions. Quote, they are agreeable to his professed principles, which he owned without reserve, in his private discourse to be independence, and from time to time he made advances towards it in public as far as would serve the great purpose of attaining to it. To his influence may be attributed the great advance made this session, which was a whole lot of words to call Samuel Adams radical.
Yeah, basically he ran his mouth so much and everybody else has either fallen to his influence or is too scared to stand up to him.
Yeah.
Which completely negates. First of all, it goes to show how influential Samuel Adams was with his words and with how he could motivate people into action. It indicates to me that Bernard and they knew full well he didn't mean for it to become a riot, but he meant for it to start as something. They knew that was one of the founders. That was one of the guys that could whip up a mob without really trying. And now he was in a position of power and was doing the same thing.
No, it's funny you say that because Samuel Adams was known for his ability to call a mob in 5 minutes. So,
yeah.
His resolves.
But they knew that going in. And so all of this mouth running was, yeah, no, we're down to one guy. Because whatever that one guy says, all the rest of them are just going to do it, which is unfair to the rest of the committee and removes their autonomy and free thinking because they elected him to those positions for a reason. They knew what they were doing.
It's kind of, some of one, some of another, because a lot of people did just agree with him and he just gave a voice to the movement. So there's so many perspectives we could consider this with. But Samuel's resolves did go colonial viral. They made it all the way across the ocean, where in England they were received as, quote, the ravings of a parcel of wild enthusiasts. Which really begs the question, how did the raving wild enthusiast, the man who couldn't keep a job, the tax man that didn't collect taxes, get a job in government? Well, he was a man of the people.
They don't have to know me. They don't like you.
There you
Thank
go.
you, Lynn.
Thanks, Lynn. Though to some folks, Samuel's methods were described to be that of the devil seducing Eve by whispering in her ear. By some folks, I do mean Andrew Oliver's brother Peter.
I was going to say, no, not some folks. That has a flavor.
Yeah. That was Andrew Oliver's brother, who also went on to say that Samuel's pull was, quote, like the cuttlefish who would discharge his muddy liquid and darken the water such a hue that the other was lost. And soon...
No. Like a cuttlefish inked all over it.
Yeah. And soon, the cuttlefish inked John Hancock, who saw Samuel as a source of salvation and protection.
I need a graphic of Samuel Adams as a cuttlefish.
I will make this happen. I got you. We're not quite. We are not.
Samuel Adams is a cuttlefish. Nope, you lost it. The episode's done. Your co-host is gone. Lost her.
We are not quite yet to the point of the blossoming romance between John Hancock and Samuel Adams. At this point, it's the cuttlefish. It's still just a sprout at this point, because Hancock might have been pretty bummed about losing the election, but he was still more afraid of possible mobs and how everyone seemed to be hungry in a way that only eating the rich could satisfy. So,
mood.
Right? He started spending more time doing social things like attending the Merchants Club or going to hang out down at the Green Dragon Tavern. And the Green Dragon Tavern was a popular place. It was also where a lot of the Masons hung out. And we will be getting into the Masons later on. I haven't done quite enough research to feel comfortable confidently discussing Masonry, but I can confidently say that the Masonic lodges in Masonry played a much bigger role than you might expect in regards to the Revolution.
We're going to go watch National Treasure. Let's go.
And then we're going to steal the Declaration of Independence. But John Hancock was a Mason. So there he went to hang out with his fellow Masons at the Green Dragon with buddies like Lightning Boy James Otis Jr., Paul, who never said the British are coming Revere, and Joseph Warren, who you haven't heard of yet, but I'm very excited to talk about.
Okay.
And our cuttlefish Samuel Adams was not a Mason, but that didn't stop him from stopping by every day. He made his rounds to all of the clubs, of which there were many. An unreasonable amount of clubs, to be honest. But Samuel stopped by all of them, whether he belonged there or not. And he also went to every town meeting and tavern, and he got to know people from all walks of life. He saw their struggles. And most importantly, he saw them as people. I mean, even Abigail Adams' husband, John Adams, said that Samuel understood, quote, the temper and character of the people better than anyone else, and that he had a gift for intellectual seduction. He also said that Samuel made it a rule to, quote, watch the rise of every brilliant genius, to seek his acquaintance, to court his friendship, to cultivate his natural feelings in favor of his country, and to warn him against the hostile designs of Great Britain.
Basically, he makes friends with all the guys who look like they could, at some point, enter positions of power or authority just to make sure they are aware there's a difference between the colonies and England.
Mm-hmm. And when Samuel first entered the House of Representatives, which did house representatives from all over Massachusetts Bay Colony, which spanned all the way to modern-day Maine at the time, Samuel started collecting powerful allies from the rural areas to broaden and enhance the power of the Boston Caucus. He knew that without having folks from every walk of life connected in the same cause, that they couldn't make positive change. And the Boston Caucus kind of ran the town from behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And soon, John Hancock will end up in cahoots with Samuel Adams, eventually throwing so much money at the situation that John Hancock became known as Samuel Adams' milch cow.
Milk cow?
Milch. I hadn't heard the word either, so I looked it up, and it is a milk-producing mammal that's kept for its milk. So I guess they're saying that they're milking him for money. But at this point, he is not yet the milch cow. He is still sitting on a fence. Because while merchants like Hancock were promising to agree to the non-importation agreements, boycotts, Hancock himself, he even said that he and his merchant pals wouldn't carry on business with Britain under a stamp, knowing that the colonists were the biggest British customers and that their boycott could ruin the economy. But rich dudes still be doing rich dude stuff, because the non-importation agreements were set to begin at the same time as the Stamp Act being implemented. And Hancock had a little bit of a last-minute plan. So
he needed his wine, didn't he? He was running out of wine.
He had until November 1st. So he decided if one of his ships made it back before the deadline, he would have it quickly unloaded and then quickly reloaded to go back to London. And then he submitted a last-minute order, quote, a small order for goods to be sent by the first spring ship. But he did attach a caveat that the order was only to be delivered if the Stamp Act was repealed, because he wanted to be the first ship back in port with goods to sell in case of the repeal at the Parliament session, which was usually around March.
Listen, I know that the people weren't a huge fan of him doing that because it was just this last minute, but also this is one of those gray areas.
No, he did this in secret. He did not want people to know that he potentially did this. This was found in his letters later on, because they all kept books of their letters.
I see how people would be like, this is a little bit concerning rich petty boy behavior, but also, honeys, you need the stuff to buy. You need him to have done this, because when those exportation agreements lift, it still takes months.
Yeah,
to get this stuff here. He was trying to, but then again, it was a little bit lining the pocket, because if I'm the only one with stuff to sell, guess you're buying it for me.
Though I would be hard pressed to believe that he was the only rich merchant to do a thing like this.
Right. The fact that we just know that he did it doesn't mean he was the only one.
Right. And he did make it clear in his letter that if the Stamp Act wasn't repealed, that he would not be receiving the order. And his choices, they do make sense, because he didn't want the stamps, but also he didn't want to destroy his livelihood, because he was struggling financially at this point. He was still the richest dude, but a lot of that was debt. He had so much debt at this time because of the post-war economy.
Which also explains the, hey, English creditors, do you want me to pay my debts? Cool. Then we can't do the stamps.
Yeah. Exactly. It was unprecedented times. No protest or resistance had ever taken place like this before. And they had no idea what was going to happen next. Again, it seems inevitable to us. We know how the story goes. Well, at least I do. Everyone else to some degree. We know the end of the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Hancock was not entirely sure what to do. Only the merchant elites were still supporting the royal governor at this time, and Hancock wasn't falling in line. He wasn't ready to switch paths entirely yet either, but he was always known for being a moderate, which would serve to benefit him in some ways and hurt him in others as the revolution carried on. And we'll be carrying on next week on Founded, an airwave media podcast. But thank you for listening to this episode of Founded. I hope you found something interesting. Drop an email at foundedhistory@gmail.com and let me know what you want to find out next. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, review, hit all the buttons, do all the things so more folks could find Founded. And remember, we don't see history repeat itself, but we continue to hear the echoes. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like Childproof and Bibliophage, and also a bunch of other podcasts that don't feature Gwenna and I. We'll see you next time. Well, you'll see us.
We love Cuttlefish Adams.